longevity. Take a look up there and find your generation. Right now there's 3 generations in the workforce, but McDonald's said there are 4. I wouldn't be surprised if there's at least 4 at Walmart as well. The idea is finding we have Generation X, we have the boomers, we have Generation Y, and the millennials. Okay, so you find your generation, and that's what we talked about. You're living to 100. You saw that National Geographic article, a baby born today is going to live to 120. You saw it on the Jersey Turnpike, Prudential Insurance. If you haven't, they have billboards up saying a baby born today lives to 120. And the people living to 100 will double by 2020, and that will continue to accelerate. So what do the people in the room say? I asked over 200 women. You're living to 100, what does that mean to you? They said, I'm living to 100. Let me think about that. If I'm living to 100, I have to afford to live to 100. If I'm going to afford to live to 100, I am going to probably have to work until I am 80. Oh my God, if I'm going to work till I'm 80, I'm going to have to stay healthy enough to work to 80, I'm going to have to stay educated enough to work to 80, and technical enough, because let's face it, Twitter only came out like 5 years ago. That's pretty scary. But the executives in the room said, you think you're worried? I have to deal with 3 and 4 generations in the workforce. They come in with different expectations. They come in with different environmental backgrounds. They come in with different education backgrounds. And somehow or another, as an executive, we have to normalize that. Think about the cost of training, trying to normalize huge gaps in the workforce. So extreme longevity was actually a pretty big one on changing the nature of work. It's a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It's actually a military term. A day in the life of a soldier is a VUCA world, right? You never know what's going to happen. But the executives in our room said, you know what? To start a company today, that's what it's like. To retain a company today, that's what it's like. You never know when there's going to be a terrorist attack. You never know when there's going to be a strike. You never know when there's a little bitty competitor eating your lunch, right? We're in a VUCA world, we don't know. Globally connected flat world. I call it from eBay to Elance, right? Since Elance gobbled up Odesk, I can't even say Odesk anymore. What does that mean? Well, as an international person, you know, it used to be that international business was all about exporting. Us out, companies over to us. Today it's really different. A couple of years ago, went out to eBay when they started, opened up a little storefront, took international business currency, right? All of a sudden I had an international business on the internet in less than an hour. It was fantastic. We can become an international business just like that. Exciting for companies. The world is our oyster in terms of opportunities. But let's look at the flip side. Elance. I found them a couple of years ago too. I really like Elance because I go out to Elance and I get videographers, I get statistics people, I get editors, I get all kinds of people there for $2 an hour. Wow, flat world labor. The whole world is my oyster as well for outsourcing. It's pretty scary stuff. As the Milken economists in our group said, you know, Trace, your competition used to be the neighbor next door, but your competition today is your world, right, world of labor. It's pretty scary. It can be really scary. There's opportunities, and it's nervousness at the same time. Okay. Smart machines and automation. This refers to hardware and also software. Think about pieces of your job could be replaced by hardware. Pieces of your job could be replaced by software. Think about the ATM machine and the bank teller. Think about the ticket agent in Southwest Airlines, right? And it's actually all offering us many more conveniences. Or think about, this is New York City. Think about the bellboy at your hotel. We don't need bellboys anymore, do we? This is a robotic. When you come in, it picks up your luggage, puts it away. When you check out, you push a button and it comes back. Okay, the future of work. So I went through a couple of the forces because we're in rapid fire today. Future of work. I said, well, what about the office structure? Is the physical aspect of work also changing when we have all of these forces? And yes, actually, I'm out in Silicon Valley, and we have, it's called the superstructured office. Number one is we have all these mega campuses popping up all over the place. Google, Apple, Facebook, right? They're taking all of the engineers pretty much, right? Trying to bring everybody together, offering food and volleyball and all kinds of amenities so that they can be more competitive. Let's bring people together so that they can innovate in real time, right? Maybe we can get an edge. But we had other companies like Google, IBM, Price Waterhouse. They said, no. Our office of the future, and what we're doing now, is we actually want people out. We want them teleworking. We want them out near the customers. We want them out as sales force because that's where work is going. We're all now connected. But then we had the startups in the room, and they said, no, the future of work is, this is the Ace Hotel, you might recognize it here in New York. This is our future of work. We don't really need to go to offices anymore. We can go to collaboration spaces and just socialize as long as they have wireless and other things, right? Because really what the future of work is maybe it's just a device, you know? And that's it. And I said, well, do you think firms will exist in the future? Or will we become like Hollywood production, right, systems, where producers and actors, right, directors, the A-team, the A players, right, come together to make that movie or product or service and then disband? Will we even be an employee in the future? Or will we be free agents, needing to compete with each other for viable slots? Lots to think about. So then we talked about some skills. Now I try to pick out of the skills a couple that are relevant to your field and your sector. The first one is called sense making. I call it uber critical thinking, right, in a data-enriched world. Giving meaning to data. Do people know Nordstrom? Okay. So last July, I get a call from Nordstrom. And they said, Tracy, this is customer service at Nordstrom in Palo Alto, and we miss you. And I said, you miss me? And they said, yeah, we really miss you. I said, how could you miss me? You don't even know me. And they said, actually, we do know you, Tracy. We know you quite well. We've been able to collect data on all of our customers for 3 years now. And we're trying to employ these data scientists and see what we can do with the data. And what we found is that you usually come into this store every August and December for the big sales. But you didn't come in last August, so we miss you. So we want to make sure that you come back. So they said, we know so much about you, Tracy. We know what departments you shop in. We know what kind of labels you wear. We even think we know your favorite salesperson. And we don't want to lose that because we're Nordstrom and we're all about customer service. So we're going to give you a $50 gift certificate. We're going to have it waiting for you right at the store. And we want you to come in and buy something with us because God forbid you went off to Neiman's or Barney's, right? So naturally, pretty spooky getting that kind of phone call. So I called up HR. I said, what's going on over there? And they said, well, you know, they're talking about data. And we're trying to figure out how can we use data to enhance our customers' experience, to become, right, more relationship focused, and ultimately to increase our sales, right? So data, giving new meaning to data. So they did. They brought in data scientists. They revamped it. And, but they're saying, how can we use data? Okay. New media literacy was another skill that came up. We started to talk about how actually 65 to 75% of people are actually more visual learners. This is how we absorb it. If you look at some of the statistics today, our younger generation, between 18 and 34, actually watch more YouTube than they do TV. Right? So how we're getting information is also evolving. And multimedia is becoming this new text. It's somewhat substituting or augmenting text and numbers. Tools out there that you can use if you combine your subject matter expertise along with technology. Computational thinking. How can you make sense and use the data and make it work for you? Do people know Watson? Okay, so Watson is a supercomputer. Actually, Watson's your new neighbor here in New York. And Watson was, because we had IBM, was out in Almaden, a supercomputer using artificial intelligence that understood native language. And Watson would go out and play Jeopardy, and Watson would always win, right? How could you not win, right? If you had all the answers in a supercomputer, it would be humanly impossible for us to win. But that's competing against machines. And that isn't what life is about anymore, right? What we want today is to compete with machines. So engineers, scientists at IBM said, I wonder if we could take Watson and pump it up with all kinds of information about cancer. You know, symptoms, prescriptions, things that maybe doctors tried that were a little controversial. And maybe we could have Watson, right, as we pump it up with all this information moving really fast. Could Watson help us get a cure to cancer maybe 10 years before we could, right? How could we compete now with Watson to help us move society ahead? Well, Watson then moved out of California. Watson went to the Cleveland Clinic because the Cleveland Clinic said, you know, that's really helpful. If we can use machines to help us solve larger problems. I wonder if we could use Watson to help us with our prescriptions because our physicians and nurses need to memorize, right, and write down and look up prescriptions. But what if you had a baby Watson next to you? With every prescription, they might even come up with a better one than the physician. But they didn't stop there. They took Watson on the road, and now Watson's here in New York as an incubator for people in the financial industry, for people in the health industry, for startup companies to come in and say, how can we use technology, right, technology of today and tomorrow to solve the problems of today and tomorrow? Watson, competing with machines. I'm going to give you one last skill example. This is not in your industry. It's called novel and adaptive thinking. But here's how I want you to think about it. In your jobs, you have subject matter expertise. At the same time, you have an increase of technology. Can you combine those two to come up with novel and new ideas that are out of the box that maybe you couldn't think of alone and that technology could not? How can you use your skills, your subject matter expertise, and actually combine it with technology? At the end of the day, the biggest skill that we talked about, which I mentioned this morning, is this concept of a T person, transdisciplinarity. The days have moved ahead where it used to be a generalist, and then all of a sudden the labor force said, oh, now we want specialists. But really what we concluded is to be in a VUCA world, right, to have the multiple generation, to be able to deal with international globalization and complex environments, you really need to have breadth and depth, and actually some technology proficiency, so that you can actually think through today's challenges and tomorrow's challenges. Okay, we're going to go ahead to the career part. Oh, and you all have the handouts? Okay, because that's where we're going to end up getting to. Point is, we've moved from a classical world to a technology-based world. I was raised in a classical world. A high school degree or a liberal arts degree was about everything you needed to get a job. That was it. You were fine. You got into companies, right? Today, it's different. Children today are graduating into a technology-based world. The environment is very different. You also have many more job options out there today. In my world, the classical world, it was the public sector. My mom was a teacher, right? or the corporate world, right? Or maybe police or fire, right? That was it. This whole idea of Shark Tank didn't even exist. The only business owners was the flower shop and the dry cleaner on the street. So you have so many more points of entry now in the workforce. And a lot of that is because the internet has certainly leveled the playing field, giving us the opportunity to create businesses. Capital has become much more accessible. So there's many more things that we can do today in the past. Why do I bring this up? Because many of us will have encore careers, right? Many of us will be dealing with, I'm in my 50s, I'm in my 60s, right? Now I want to go on and do something else. What will I do if I only know the corporate world? Well, there's lots to do. Don't fear, there's lots to do. You might want to just start thinking about it. And that's what I'm here to help you do. Now, I did not know that Barbara was speaking today, but I always show a clip from Shark Tank. Why? Because it's so energizing today. As I mentioned, women are one of the fastest business, starting business segments. It's exciting to think that you in the room today could actually, in your encore career, be a business owner and start something, because that wasn't even feasible for me. And so I love showing this one segment. You may be working in one company for a long time. You're actually not the norm. As I mentioned this morning, the velocity of job turnover and change is very quick now. The Bureau of Labor Statistics quotes that boomers and Generation X, we change our jobs every 4 years, 4 months, and millennials are at about 2.3 to 8 months, 2.3 years to 2.2 years plus 8 months. So the velocity of change is pretty great, which means you're probably, if you're going to work till 80, you might have a lot of stops, right? And your career may start looking a little bit like this. And out where I am in Silicon Valley, we're so used to turnover and change and a lot of velocity because firms come and go. But a lot of people may not be. So if you're looking at it, I would say look at it as your career adventure, you know? Not just the one career for life, but what is my whole adventure going to look like? Okay. And each generation, because I like to always stop on thoughts about it, because I don't know what generation you're in. If you're a millennial or Generation X or baby boomer, every generation also has a different idea about how they want their life to go. They may have different messaging depending on where you're born in society. So people know 30 Rock? Familiar with the show? Okay. Do you remember when Liz mentored Suri? Now, Suri is a Generation Y millennial who has a very different perspective on how she wants her life to look like than Liz, who's probably a Generation X or Boomer. Let's talk a little bit now about the future of you. Retirement statistics. Every day I go through the newspapers and I just look for interesting little tidbits. So I came across a whole series of statistics on retirement. Half of the Americans age 50 and older are working or looking for work. 40% of the unemployed workers are over the age of 45. Older workers are more expensive to employ and insure. Unemployed adults in their 50s are a fifth less likely to be hired or reemployed than those younger than them. Can you afford to retire? 36% of us in America have $1,000 or less in savings. At age 62, only 30% of Americans are prepared for retirement. 55% of us can't cover the retirement basic expenses such as housing, food, and health care. 2/3 of us are retiring on $12,000 in savings. So it's pretty scary. It's probably no one in the room, right? But now you can see why people are saying, I'm never going to retire, I'm going to work until I drop, right? And I hear that more and more from people saying, I actually do have to work until I'm 80 or 90. But here's the other interesting thing, is I started to pull together statistics on how much time do people spend doing things. And look what's at the way bottom down here. Excuse me for walking in front of this, but this is career planning. This is how much time, when college students graduate as seniors going into the workforce, this is how much time they spend on career planning per year, an hour and a half. That's how much time they spend sleeping all the way at the other end, right? 2,700 hours. But let's just look at this, right? You spend more time buying a car, planning a vacation, hunting for a house, planning a wedding, right? Doing household activities and eating and drinking than you do on your own career planning.
1.5 hours is, who was that, people right out of college?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So wouldn't it be interesting and more thoughtful if we thought about spending more time on career planning? Okay. Why do I bring this up? Because I really don't want anyone in this room to get stuck here with the frameworks. This is a personal business plan. Some of the themes that we talk about is life is much more integrated. Our younger generation has brought that to our attention. It isn't really about work and social anymore, right? Home and work. Everything is 24/7. Everything is integrated today. And so is your planning for finances, your health, your work, right? Every aspect of life is so much more integrated. So it's worth planning. Let me explain this framework to you. So I understand that you have books outside waiting for you. I explained with my colleague how to work through the framework, but I want you to at least get your hands on it so that you can just see the thought process and then you can spend time. So the idea is what you should have in front of you are sheets with decades. Let me make sure you got the whole pack. They're two-sided. Right? And the first one I want you to look at is the sheet with the decades. 10 to 50, 60 to 100. Okay? I want you to get used to the idea of realizing you're living to 100. Right? You're going to start planning, not that there's a big drop-off at 50 and a big black hole, but to 100. Are there hand-ups? Okay, so step one is pretty easy. Circle a number somewhere between, just circle between 10 and 20, right? Bring yourself back to your last education level before advanced degrees, okay? So think about when you were either a senior in college, if you went on for a master's degree and all that, just don't include that. It's your bachelor degree. Or if you were in high school, your senior year in high school, if you didn't go on for a bachelor's, or if you went somewhere in between, the last year of education before an advanced degree, okay? Basically, you're probably somewhere in your late teens, 20s maybe, something like that. That's the moment I want you to grab, right? Grab that moment, look down the categories, and try to remember what you were thinking about at that time, if you had any goals, right? Remember I said, college students upon graduation don't do career planning. So there's a good chance you didn't have a lot of ideas, but you might have had a few. So look down education, really simple. Were you thinking I'm going to go on for an advanced degree or are you going to go to work? Or I want an advanced degree or a medical degree, but I want it when I'm 50, right? Any of that, if you had no thoughts, NA, right? Don't worry about it, just put in an NA. Number two, at that age, socially, did you have any ideas? Maybe you were going to get married. Maybe you already were married. Maybe you were going to have a kid or you knew you wanted to have a kid. Maybe you knew that you were going to live in the neighborhood where you lived and you were going to buy a house. Maybe you knew you were going to move out of the neighborhood where you lived and go somewhere else. It's just capture that idea at that age 20 that you thought. If you had no ideas whatsoever, just do an NA. Work. Did you have an idea at that age of what work would be like? Was it just whatever job you could get? Very logical. Or you had a vision for yourself that you wanted to go to work and then you wanted to be a lawyer or you wanted to be in finance or something. Or own your own business. You didn't have any thinking at age 20? Put in NA, no worries. Finances, at that point, did you want to pay off debt? Or maybe you had money and you wanted to invest money. Or maybe you were in between and you just wanted to save money. Or maybe you just weren't really thinking about money at all. Same thing with health, which is more of, exercise, health, diet, anything stand out in your head. Or leisures and hobby. Did you have a special hobby, a special sport, a special talent that you knew you wanted to do? Okay.
But this is forward-looking. So this is not what we did in our
Correct.
30s, but actually what we were thinking our life would be like.
Exactly. It's just we're just trying to get a little snippet of what you were thinking at 20, and then we'll get on to the next step. Now flip the page back and forth. Was there anything when you were 20, graduating from college or whatever, that you had hung a date on? By this date, I'm going to be retired. By this date, I'm going to have 4 children and be living in Alaska, right? Or if anything stands out in your mind from that point, just put it in there, right? Hold on to it. And that's it. Very simple, not complicated. Okay. In fact, let me go through mine because it might be helpful if you see an example. And actually, in the book, I have examples, so no worries there. Okay. Here's Tracy, right, in her 20s. Education, right, in the black, right? Red was everything that I was maybe thinking about or not at all. I got a BA degree. I ran out of that college. Actually, graduated early because I couldn't stand education. Right? I was like, I am not a good student. I don't want to be here. I want to work. I want to make money. Don't ever put me back in college again. And the work will take over and train me. That's it. That's the only thing I could think about. Social. I like to date. All my friends had visions. They had their kids' names. They had their marriages, their partners picked out. They had visions, right? I sat there and said, no, dating. That's it. Work. Work, I had some ideas. I actually wanted to join a company. I wanted to stay in that company forever. And actually, I wanted to be a manager in my 20s, a director in my 30s, a VP in my 40s, and an EVP or CEO in my 50s. I was very, for whatever reason, that sort of stuck in my head. Okay? Finances, I was very into saving. Health was, walking, aerobics, whatever. I knew that it was kind of on my radar. And leisure was interesting, travel. I like to travel. I just always saw myself traveling. But I didn't think about too much else. Okay. I had ideas about retirement. I knew that I was probably supposed to do it somewhere in my 60s, and I thought absolutely by 70 I'd be retired and probably living off of some sort of savings. That's all I really thought about, nothing else, okay? Now, I want you to go back. I actually don't want you to look at this yet, right? Let me just put that. Now I want you to go in and circle the date of the decade where you are today. Now if you could go in, if you want to use a different color pen, a different color pencil, put it at a different point, write in what happened between the moment when you got out of school to today. And just start to fill in, you don't have to share it with anybody. What are some of the activities? Did you go on to school? What activities happened? These are, this is an aggregation of a lot of people's responses, but can you fill in the dates? Did you finish an MBA? Did you do extra certifications? Did you do any kind of training? Did you get work training? Anything there? Socially, did you partner? Did you get married? Did you buy a house? Did you move? Right? What happened between that date and your decade now? Work. What happened? Did you get the job that you thought you were going to get? Did you switch jobs? Did you get laid off from a job? Did you start a business and then go to work? Can you fill in all the activities that happen there? Finances. Did you save? Did you pay off debt? Did you increase debt? Did you win it big at the lottery? Maybe there's a big inheritance. Did anything change there? Health. Did you get sick? Or did you start to diet? Or did you start a new fitness program? Or maybe get involved with a key sport? Become vegetarian versus eating meat? I don't know. Right? And then leisures and hobbies. Did anything happen? Now, when you get to my age, it takes you a really long time to fill it all in, right? I know we have different ages in the room, but it's really starting to say, did the world change from when I thought I was in my plan? Or did I follow my plan? Or did other things happen in life that changed my plan? And where am I, and do I have a plan? And now, I'll pull up mine if it's helpful for you. So sort of what happened to me is I thought I would never, ever, ever go back to school, and I did. And I actually had to go back to school a lot in my 30s because when I tried to join, get ahead at Apple Computer, I was told that you'll go nowhere unless you have an advanced degree in technology, which changed my view of education immediately because it meant that I wasn't going to get income. And I wasn't going to follow that little work track that I had in my head. Right? So very interesting what caused it. And so I had to go back to school at night on weekends. Interesting enough, I bought a home before I got married because I wasn't too sure about getting married. So that was an interesting for me. But the work was even more challenging. I actually worked for 5 firms. I'm a millennial. I worked for over 5 firms in my 20s. I got laid off. I had 2 moves, but I did get the manager, right? So a lot of activity happened in my 20s. And I got into finance a little bit because I started to save, okay, I need to save money. And did some other things. And then I saw that travel hobby got quite interesting for me because I started to integrate it into my job. I sort of saw myself going after jobs that had travel. So I was starting to intuitively sort of weave the hobby into work, right? Because I really liked it. And then because I went to school, I had a thesis. And the thesis was about doing business in Japan, and that was quite interesting to a publisher. And then all of a sudden I had a book. And that was very interesting because I never thought I would have a book nor want one in my 20s. But it was because I was traveling overseas and had an interesting thesis. And so that started me on this new hobby of doing other books and research, which led on to the PhD, right? And then I had many more layoffs, right? Layoffs come. But it was interesting, I kept holding on to that idea of work, of being director, vice president. What changed is it wasn't in the same firm. It was in other firms. So I learned about lateral moves, right? And actually, if you go on, the red is where we're planning ahead, right? So once you fill in all of the activities you've done today, the next step is, can you start to fill in your future, right? Where are you today? What are the hobbies, right? What skills do you have? Where do you want your work to go? And now can you start filling in the decades moving ahead, right? So again, how can I fill in based on what I've done so far, based on my ideas of where I want to be in the future, and get the charts populated? And I would like you to think about populating out to 100, right? Not stopping at 50 or 60 or 70, but getting out to 100. Now, I aggregated a lot of responses. This will be easier for you to see in the book, of what people are doing. Because what we found is if people started to see what other people were really doing at different ages, they would get more ideas on what maybe they would like to do to be employed for life. So for example, I have a neighbor, Herman, who's 97. And Herman did one of my charts for me. Really good guy. Herman walked 7 miles a day. He worked till he was 82. He was a shoe salesman in Chicago. And he led his life, he had it perfectly mapped out. And after he retired, the plan was that he and his wife would have 2 children, which they did, and then they would retire to Arizona. And they followed exactly, right, he's World War II, and he did exactly what he planned to do, really well organized. When he got to Arizona, his wife got very sick, and she died. And Herman said his whole plan changed because it wasn't what was supposed to happen. The husband is always supposed to die, he said, before the wife. So our whole world was set up with a certain plan, and that plan went away. So I said, so what'd you do? He said, I had to make a new plan. So I took the information, took my planning skills, and said, okay, how am I going to move ahead? So in his 60s, unfortunately this happened when he was in his 60s, his children helped him move up to the Bay Area because that's where they lived, and he started all over again. And he decided he needed to work because he was alone, right, and wanted to be active, and needed social, right? His whole life had been really revolved around his wife and his family. And he said, what keeps me going every day is doing a plan. Because based on Herman, I said, okay, we can't just do decades. He said, you know, you really need to start breaking it down, you know? So if you have a goal, right, so that's the next step is filling in your chart. If you have a goal, can you pick one big idea that you have and break it down to a year? So the next one is picking a goal, breaking it down, the one with the months on it. Can you pick one goal and say in 5 years, okay, you can't do 5 years, in 3 years, you can't do 3 years. In 1 year, pick one goal and say, okay, this is what I want to do in 1 year. And can you break it down by month? Can you break it down by week? Can you break it down by day? It's just like planning a diet, right? Let's say I want to lose 10 pounds by the end of this year, right? How am I going to do that? What are the steps I'll take and fill it in? It's the same thing. I want to have a job change or lateral move in 2 years. How am I going to make that happen? Right? What steps do I need to take to make that lateral move or make that job change? Who do I need to meet? What do I need to know? What do I need to find out? How can I fill in the gaps, right? What's the process in the protocol? And set up a plan. Does that make sense? Any questions? That's the framework. It's really, actually, it's the framework. I'll tell you how it's helped some people on my team. The young woman, she had her plan, actually Courtney, who worked on this book with me, that her vision of where she wanted to be, she actually got a PhD when she was in her 20s. So she almost like finished all of college. And her vision was that she would be a writer and write books for the rest of her life. Right? And she wanted to have 2 children by a certain age. And she had the unexpected, which people do, is that she had a job and then had a layoff, and she had a child and her husband didn't get promoted. So things got out of kilter. And so they sat down and said, you know, you really do need to plan. And they readjusted their plan for kids, but they also readjusted his plan on his career, because while she was laid off, he had to make some different maneuvers so that they could bring in more income. They postponed their goal of moving to China. They actually wanted to move to China for 3 years because he's from China, and they wanted their daughter and their next child to spend time there. And they said by planning, bringing in the financial part, bringing in the goal planning part, that they could start to make adjustments each year or each decade to figure out where they're at. So today, now they're having their second child. It's a year after their timeline than they expected. They'll be going to China in 2 more years from now. She got a job because she got focused on another area, and he got promoted. And they said it was really the tool that helped them figure out together their planning steps. Now, I know this is really hard to do in a room with a lot of people, but I would encourage you to start thinking about goals and setting them so that you can get to your ultimate goal, right, of being employable for life and touch on all the areas. Any questions? Yeah.
We talked a lot about, this plan is a lot about tangibles. It's about milestones, titles, right? So it's, to some degree, a definition of success that's very external or externally focused. But obviously, to be able to be employable until you're 80 or 90, or until I'm 80 or 90, which is another 50 years, I need a long stream of energy, internal drive, ambition, wanting to grow. So thank you. There's a lot of soft skills, right, that I need to bring to this as well. Yeah. Have you done some research into that too? So not just planning and having a plan, which I fully subscribe to, but actually, what do I need to do in terms of inward housekeeping to actually be able to do that for the next 50 years as well?
Absolutely. So these are large and very generic for a reason, right? You can add on boxes. Yeah. You can redefine a box, right, to be what it means the most to you. The idea, and it sounds like what you'd like to do is add on a couple of boxes. Yeah. Yeah. For what kind of mindset do you need? Yeah. Right? What are some of the other things? That's fine. It's really just a framework to get you thinking about an integrated life, right? It isn't really just work and home anymore, right? What are some of the things that I need to do to get from point A to point B? Right? I personally had to get over not wanting to go back to school, right? That was, tough for me. And then once you're doing it, you realize, you can do it. So I wouldn't say this is a limit, this is a confined area. It's something that you can play with, go back to. I go back to it all the time. Right now, I'm digging deep into my hobbies, my structure, my thinking of how can I take all of my experience and skills and move my business, right? That was very new for me, very interesting for me, but I didn't know what I had, right? What do I have to do? And I started to go through saying, okay, what are the skills and expertise that I need? And it ended up to be more technology. Interesting enough, is that I needed to pick up more hats when you have your own business, and technology in a different way. It wasn't understanding the hardware anymore, it was understanding the social media side. So good question. This is not a rigid thing. This is a template and a format. Other points? Does anybody have an idea of what you would like to be doing? I mean, have you thought through? You do. Anyone want to share? Yes.
Sometimes people are developing themselves. People are changing and developing themselves, and they have other expectations during their life. Therefore, the theory and the praxis couldn't be matched with each other. Or for example, your example with the death, there are some unexpected situations in life that you couldn't plan
Exactly. No, I agree with you 100%. The moves that occurred in my 20s were unexpected moves. I had to do with family health. I thought from New York, I thought I was going to be here. Maybe I was going to be at this company, right? But I was going to be here, and that was it. That was just my vision. I had to have 2 moves, and ultimately ended up in California due to unexpected family health reasons, right? Which put my whole world into a swirl again because of trying to get employment in a very technology-based community, which was totally different than my world here. So I agree with you. So setting plans and goals, but they can change, right? You can have your vision and say, okay, by this time, I'd like to do that. Oops, didn't happen. Like Herman, got to redirect, think of another route, right? How do you keep going? The idea is if you don't have any targets at all, you're kind of floating, you know? You're kind of waiting for something to happen. And I would encourage you to start, just create a couple little targets, you know? Even if it's just a diet or a hobby you want to do, to get yourself used to thinking about planning ahead. It doesn't have to be a career. It could be getting married, or it could be having a kid, right? It's just pick something. Other comments? Yes?
Just a quick question. You mentioned that there are a lot of people in their 50s, because I know a lot of senior people that got laid off a couple of years ago still haven't found work. And
Yep.
they're very senior and they're very qualified.
Yep.
But you're saying you go into your 60s, 70s, and 80s because you're probably working until then. But companies don't want people that old.
That's right.
So then what do you do? I mean, like, I know you touched on it, about
Options.
like Herman's situation,
Yeah.
but that's more realistic, unfortunately, nowadays.
Yep, it absolutely is, which is why I'm really drilling this, because I really don't want you to be in that situation. Oops, wrong way. Okay, you got to remember there's more options today, right? Let's go back to our options. I also want you to think about if you're put into that situation, and you'll say, never me, and everybody says that, but I've had 3 layoffs and had to manage a lot more. I thought it was like right there. Let me just do escape. If you were put in the situation where you were laid off, are you skilled enough to do something else, right? So this was the slide. This is the slide I was looking for. Are you skilled enough to look at other options? A lot of people look at not-for-profits. A lot of people look at self-employment. Or are you thinking about it now, right? Is there a hobby that maybe you want to put out on the radar as developing into a future business, right? Nothing wrong with that, right? You can do it on weekends or nights, right? Is there anything out there that you can think of that you might want to start learning about, you know? Maybe it's, a lot of people doing healthcare. I'll give you another example. I have a colleague of mine, she's 68, she's working, and been through many, many layoffs. And she's realized that she doesn't have enough money for retirement. She's a single mom, daughter's getting married, doesn't have a lot of income. And she said, well, I will be that person working till 90, right? So what am I going to do? So she said, you know, I have to look at reality of where I live and my age. There are age-appropriate industries. High-tech is probably not an age-appropriate industry, although she lives in the high-tech area. So what she's doing now is taking gerontology certifications at 68. And why is she doing that? Because she said the boomer generation's all retiring. And who better to take care of a geezer but a geezer? Right, so she's planning ahead while she's working and saying, let me take a gerontology certification at night. She is in IT. Her plan is that she probably will move into the healthcare systems because it's an age-appropriate type of industry, and combine the gerontology with the technical background, right? So that's like sort of just saying, I'm getting that feeling, right? That her other comment is when you're working in firms, have wide eyes and big ears. That when you're laid off a lot, like many of us are, you start to see signs and symptoms, and you look and just sort of say, okay, if this was me, right, what would I do, right? wouldn't you start to network a little bit? Wouldn't you start to explore what else is out there, or other moves in other firms, right? Put it out there, right? You know, I'm being very candid with you. I wish everybody could stay in a firm and work there for life and embrace it, but it doesn't always happen that way. And so just don't wait until you get dropped and burned, right? Start thinking about it. Yes?
My question is more about technology. So a lot of the examples that you showed were very high technology focused, and you mentioned that you had gone back to get a PhD in the technology sector. For a lot of us, probably moving more into the tech space or gaining more tech skills would also require a lot of education or training or forethought. So I guess my question is, from your position in Silicon Valley, what would you think are the core technology skills that people like ourselves who maybe aren't in the technology space should be on top of to think about that are going to be integral to our jobs in the next 20, 30, 40 years?
Yeah, so what I did, and what I would encourage you to do, is work with your vendors, right, and look at the technologies that are in your field. So I don't know what you're using, right? So when I was at Cisco, it was networking, it was Apple, it was mobility. Your vendors and your partners know a lot about where the technology is going. I spent many years actually in manufacturing, right? So if I was in manufacturing today, I would probably beef up on robotics and 3D printing. Right, and you would know that, in your industry. I mean, you're in your industry, you know what technologies are in your industry. You don't have to go back to formalized training for it. That was a requirement put down right in front of me. But I would certainly encourage you to use it, join groups with it. I mean, I have raised my hand in companies to be on technology teams. Technology is not really intuitive for me, but I notice that if I'm on teams where other people are experts, it sort of rubs off a little bit. So there's no one technology because it'll evolve forever. But if you're in an industry and you really like the industry you're in, I would watch that and learn those technologies, right, where it is. And whether it's seminars or classes or working with your vendors to be able to figure it out and use it. Well, there's no magic bullet with technologies. I think we're actually at the end, yeah. So I want to thank you for your time today. I know that's a lot to throw at somebody and pretty hard to do. I just want to get you guys thinking and planning. And if you've done that, I've done my job. And thank you very much.